And this is why we don't plant tomatoes in Oklahoma in March. Yesterday was warm and sunny, and today it's overcast. It's an upside down day, meaning that the weather's just going to get colder as the day progresses. It's actually pretty nice out here this morning, but there is a cold front that is moving in this afternoon, and we are going to have a hard freeze not only tomorrow morning, but also the next morning. So anything like tomatoes, if you planted them this early on a warm spring day, they're just going to freeze and die, and you're just going to have to replant them. So that's why I wait until April 15th. Now, I do have a few things out on the patio and the porches. My winter containers with mostly with perennials that are fairly cold tolerant, and they could probably survive those temperatures if I gave them a good water. But they all have new growth on them, and they're looking pretty nice right now. So I don't want to chance it this late in the season because we want them to continue to look good. So I'm just gonna load them up in the golf cart, tuck them in the garage for a couple days, and then I will bring them back out um, when it warms up in 3 days. March in Oklahoma. So there we are, all loaded up. We have our camellias, which they are cold tolerant, but if you do leave them out and they get just a little too much cold, you will get this sort of thing happen. So yeah, that happened in the winter time. I forgot one night. So we don't want any more of that happening because we've got look at all this new growth is just popping up there. So we want that one to push out. Oh, there's some more. We want this one to push out some more leaves. And then these are smaller ones, but they are in ceramic containers, so we don't want those to freeze. And then this is a winter twig dogwood that, yes, winter twigged dogwood that we need to plant out. It's very cold tolerant, but it is in a plastic nursery pot, so it would just blow, we don't want it blowing away when the winds get high. Ooh, sun came out for a minute. And then our two this is a bit of a yellow twig dogwood wood that we had, which is this pot. It got blown over a few days ago and broke off, but we're going to plant it still and it'll probably come back. My Winchester Cathedral and my green Romantica roses that I keep in containers, they've got a ton of new growth. I need to prune them. I haven't done anything to them yet, but why chance it? So let's just tuck them in the garage and they will be happy to hang out in there for a couple of days. And then we also have a couple of pots of winterberry, which are very cold tolerant. I try to overwinter them every year. I'm sorry, over summer them every year. They just don't like our summer heat. So we just grabbed them because they're not that big. And we'll go ahead and take them in, and we had room on the cart. And then also we have a couple of arborvitaes. Once again, very cold tolerant, but they are in proven winter plastic pots, so easy to blow around. So we don't want them blowing to the next county when the cold front comes through. So yeah, we're gonna take all this to the garage. I'm really glad that I brought those containers into the garage because it actually got a bit colder than was forecast. Our lowest temperature was 22 degrees. Yes. And then the next morning it was 25. So it has started to it is warming up. And in true Oklahoma fashion, it is going to be 89 degrees on Sunday. So before I head back out to my weeding and my pruning, I thought I would share something that has been happening inside that has been quite lovely and just made it a delight to stay inside these past couple of days when it's been cold. And that is my citrus are blooming. Now, you've probably seen these in, I've used them as a backdrop in several of my videos and pictures and whatnot. But yes, this is my citrus collection, what I call the winter garden. So the citrus blooming is just wonderful. The smell. If you're coming in from the back of the house or from the garage, you just walk in and you're like, it's just delightful. And so the other morning, himself and I were setting, him with his coffee, me with my tea, and we were talking about the citrus and how long have we been growing citrus, and between a bit of reminiscing and a bit of googling, we came up with about 20 years. Yeah, 20 years. The first citrus that we bought was a garden center was going out of business in Tulsa. The interstate was being expanded, and so the interstate was going to go right through their nursery. And so they had a clearance sale, and so we bought, I want to say, four or five decent sized citrus. And hilariously enough, I use that on ramp and exit ramp almost every time I go to Tulsa. I literally drive right through where I got my citrus from. So we bought four, like I say, four or five. And I know we got a Meyer lemon and we got a couple of oranges and I want to say two limes. But so yeah, that was our first citrus um, purchases. Now, back then, it was harder to find citrus, and it was also, if you did find them, they were quite pricey. So even though we got those on sale, by the time we spent the money on big containers for them and potting soil and whatnot, it was quite the investment. And it continues to be an investment. Now, nowadays, you can find citrus a little more easily. Last year, Tractor Supply had some really nice ones of different varieties and whatnot. We got a few there, and so yeah, they're getting easier to find. But one thing that has not improved in 20 years, uh, I have been looking for a reference book on how to grow citrus. I am big on gardening books and reference books. Teach you a multitude of things. And in all these years, I have not found a good citrus book. Um, they just don't appear to be out there. You will, from time to time, find one that is very glossy with very pretty pictures, but very little information on how to actually grow, maintain, pests, problems that you may have. Sometimes they'll include recipes, but the actual how to is very lacking. And then last year, I found a newer one that I'd seen mentioned a couple of times, and I ordered it, and it was pretty good. As far as it had a lot on types of citrus and plant selection and growing in containers and in colder, overwintering in colder temperatures and whatnot. But what it didn't have, it had was anything on pollination. Not a bit. And also it had the ugliest cover. It was like cringy every time you looked at it. So we're not even going to mention it. So what I know about growing citrus, it has been hands-on, trial and error, little bits of wisdom that I would find in someone's blog post or a YouTube video. I mean, I haven't really searched YouTube lately to see if there's somebody who's really doing a lot with citrus in containers. But yeah, so everything that I know about citrus growing, I've just kind of had to learn on my own. And so I thought, since spring is almost here and you'll be at the garden center and you may come across some citrus because, like I said, they are getting easier to find and less money. I thought I would share a few of the things that I have learned over the years. And a realistic idea of what it takes to grow citrus in Oklahoma. So that first year, we bought our citrus, we brought them home, we potted them up in our new containers, and we put them out on the deck. And they looked lovely out there because citrus make wonderful patio and deck plants because they give you structure, some height. They look good. You know, it gives you a little tropical vibe out on your patio for summer. But eventually, summer is over, and there is a cold weather on the horizon, and that leads me to the first thing that you need to know about growing citrus. um, I live in zone 7B, and here in Oklahoma you cannot leave citrus outside in a container. You cannot grow them in the ground. We get too cold for that. 22 degrees on Monday. Yeah, so if you live in zone 7 or lower, zone 6, zone 4, whatever, you cannot grow them out. You cannot leave them outdoors over winter. The only place you can grow them in the ground or leave them outside in a container over winter would be California, Florida, and parts of Texas. So they have to come inside. So that is the first thing. You're going to have to figure out, where are you going to put these over the winter. Now, for us, that first year, we brought them in and we put them in our dining room. Now, this was not a very big dining room. It did have a window, but it wasn't a very big dining room. And so if you were sitting on that side of the table where the citrus were, you needed to be careful when you backed your chair up, because if you backed too quickly, they could poke you. Citrus, depending on the variety, can be kind of pokey. So, yeah, that's where we put them. And they stayed in there over the winter, and then we took them back outside in the spring, which leads you to the first problem with growing citrus in containers. When you take them, they don't like change. They do not like change. So if they've been outside in natural light, and even if the days are getting shorter, but natural light, and then you bring them in your house where they're getting a lot less light, they will drop leaves. They will drop a lot of leaves. They may drop all their leaves. Now, as long as you keep them from freezing, they will, you can take them back out the next year and they'll put on new growth, and they should be fine. And there are people who, I have not personally done this, but there are people who take them in their garage and basically let them go dormant over the winter with no light, and as long as you keep them from freezing, and then take them out in the spring. So for us, we put them in our dining room. It got sunlight, and so you would lose a lot of leaves. And also another thing that will happen, and you can kind of see it here. So this is my kitchen. Cooktops over there. Dining room is over there. We have a skylight here, and we have a bay windowy situation happening over here. But you can see this particular plant. You see this big leafy stem? It's growing up toward the skylight. This one here, big leafy thing, is growing over toward the window. So that will happen. They will reach for the light. You will get leaves that are sometimes ginormous, a lot bigger, because they're wanting light. And then another side will be just dropping leaves. Now I'm gonna trim this off. I'm gonna give it a bit of a haircut, shape it up, and get rid of these scraggly bits. But this is something that they do. So that's your first thing. You have to figure out where you're gonna put them.
where are you going to put them? So, as I say, I have them here in my kitchen. I also have a few out in the garage. Our garage has heat, so we keep it from freezing. Usually keep it about 50 degrees at the coldest, and those get sunlight, not a ton, and actually they look quite good. Uh, because another problem that you will have when you bring citrus in is spider mites. Now, spider mites love it dark, love it dry and warm. And most of us keep our houses pretty warm. And then winter is also a very dry season. So some people like to use humidifiers. I personally have never done that. I don't have one, so I don't do it. But some people find that useful, and it probably is. You can also get like a spray container and just give them a spritz from time to time. Just and kind of that also keeps kind of the dust, just regular dust off of them, and that will help with the spider mites. Another thing that will help is giving your plants plenty of room. And I kind of got mine bunched up here because um this is the walk. I'm standing in the walkway, so we've got this little island of citrus over here that you can walk this way or you can walk over that side by the pantry and get to the dining room. So I only have so much space, so they're kind of bunched up a little bit. If you can give them more space, that's great. Now, if we can pan over here to the side with the bay window, you can see these are all they're pretty close together. So they would if I could give them a little more room, that would be great. But you have to keep an eye out for spider mites. That is always a problem when you bring citrus in the house. And that is probably one of the upsides of keeping them in a garage, and either a dark garage and trying to go dormant, or like our garage where they're still getting some light, is that the cooler temperatures, you get less spider mites. So you kind of got to decide that. They don't necessarily make. I mean, these are pretty, but if your house is dark and you've got one side with this big funky leaf and the other side has lost all its leaves, and it's not a pretty house plant. So there you're gonna have to decide on that if it's worth your time and your effort, because you are going to have to bring them in. So we did that for several years, in and out, in and out. We just always made it a bit of a tradition. It was like, oh, it's the weekend, which leads me to the next thing you need to keep in mind, and that is, can you carry that pot? Can you lift that pot? Do you have help? Now, this little guy, oops, I'm on back up here, camera. This little guy in this little pot, yeah, I can lift that. Um, Not a problem. This, however, this ginormous pot or this pot, that's going to require both me and himself to carry. It is on rollers, so you can roll it as far as you can, but that's going to require both of us. Or better yet, Samuel's going to come to visit. And so that's something you have to keep in mind. Are you going to be able to carry these plants in and out? That may impact how many you buy or what size you get, that sort of thing. And also the type of container. You don't want to use a really heavy ceramic pot and then fill that with dirt, and it's just going to make it so much heavier. These are that resiny stuff that they look like ceramic pots, but they're actually lightweight. So you're gonna have to keep that in mind. Can you lift them? Can you carry them? So for several years, we did the in and out, and Sam, we'd make like I say, we'd make a tradition of it. Sam would come over for the weekend. We would carry the pots out onto the deck, and then in the fall, reverse it, they've come back in the house. And so we did that for a lot of years. And then came the glass house. The glass house. So himself was given some tempered glass, and so we've been carrying these citrus in and out for quite a while, and we had, they often looked kind of bad because they would drop their leaves in the house and whatnot. So we built the glass house. Now the glass house was the focus of my garden from late fall into spring. And then late spring, we would take all the citrus out and put them on the deck, because nobody wants to sit in a glass house in Oklahoma when it's 100 degrees in August. It's just too hot for your plants. So it would become, once again, it was still a tradition of, that spring is here, we're moving them all out. And it was always kind of sad, because then there'd be like one cactus left in there. And so we would move them out on the deck, and they would spend the summer out there, and then we would move them back into the glass house. Usually sometime in October is when that would happen. Now, because the light was similar, there wasn't a drastic change in light. We were just protecting them from the cold. We didn't lose a lot of leaves. They would stay greener and prettier. But the conditions in the glass house make it just the place for the next problem that you can encounter with citrus, and that is scale. Scale are these creatures. They're soft-bodied when they're young and they move around and whatnot, but eventually they latch on to your stem of your citrus, the wooden part. They latch on, and they just try and suck the life out of your plants. And so that can become a problem. Now, I do not use pesticides in my garden. And I especially don't want to use pesticides on something edible like a citrus or anything edible. I don't want to use pesticides on that. So you're fairly limited on what you can use to try and control scale, and it's mainly insecticidal soap and neem oil are the things you can use, and it's a time-consuming thing. You got to stay on. You got to have a schedule and keep them sprayed and whatnot. You can also take a bleach wipe and just try and scrape the scale off your plants. But that, depending on how many you have, that's a lot of work. So the glass house was lovely, but you had a different set of problems then. We would also still get some spider mites, but because we had the doors that we could open up, we could just roll them out and roll the citrus out, and we had them all on roller carts. You could roll them out, you could hose them off on a pretty day, and then put them back in. So that was helpful. So that's your net. So those are your two problems. You're going to have spider mites and scale. Going to be an issue. So the glass house was the home of the citrus for quite some time, for several years there. It was lovely and delightful to go out there and sit on a cold winter day, just sit in the warmth of the glass house, and when the flowers were blooming, it smelled wonderful and all of that. And then of course, and then came the house fire. We talked about that in our first episode, plotting and planning our prologue. But so fire happened, house fire happened. The glass house survived, but we had always had a warning system to tell us if we had a heater failure, if the temperature was dropping or whatnot. And so a few weeks after the house fire, we had the great freeze. and and we lost a heater, and we we were 30 minutes away, so we didn't have any warning that it happened, and so we lost a ton of plants. Um, and some of them that I thought died came back. And of the original plants we bought, this one right here, about 20 years ago, this plant is still with us. This is a lime, and this is an orange, and also this one is an orange. And then there's another one around here. If you can see it. This is I'll get a picture of it. It's a variegated lemon, and I haven't had it quite as long. I rescued it from Sam's Club for $8 and took it home to the glass house and nursed it back to health. So those three are my oldest. They came after they looked awful after the big freeze. And so they started putting on some new growth, and that we took them over to nephew Sam's house, and they spent the summer on his front porch and recovered quite nicely. And then when we moved here, we brought them in. Like I say, we have the skylight here and the bay windows there. I think this area is supposed to be the breakfast nook, but I don't know why that is, because okay, the kitchen is right there. The dining room table is right over there, so I'm not sure why you would need another table like right here. So as soon as I saw it, I was like, well, that's where I'm putting the citrus. So this is where they hang out all winter long. These smaller ones over on this side in the bay window. And so this is where they hang out. Now, I do want to mention that I did make a bit of a discovery. We had a couple of the older plants that had scale on them that we had been fighting, and so we kind of quarantined them off in an area of the patio, and I left them outside a little longer. And so they got a little more cold weather, not like bitterly cold, but a little more cold weather. And then last year I moved them in the garage and kept them fairly cool in there. And that seemed to get rid of the scale. It seemed I think they got cold enough that maybe it killed the scale. I don't know, but that's just something that those are your two things you got to watch out for: scale and spider mites. So yeah, this is where they stay, which leads me to our next discussion that I mentioned earlier, and that is pollination. Now, one thing that I haven't done I've done occasionally in the past, but I really need to start paying attention to. Um, Before, when I had the citrus in the glass house, we had these big double doors. And so on a day like today, when it's pretty out, you would open the doors and, insects would fly through, the wind would come through. And so that helps with pollination and for you to get fruit off your trees. I do not have any bees in my house. So, I haven't really done this. But I think if I started doing it regularly, I would get more fruit. I've got limes over there. But citrus are self-pollinating, meaning that they have male and female flowers. And so they need the insects, they need the wind to move that pollen around and fertilize the fruit. So what you're going to do, what I need to do, and if you want to get a lot of fruit off of bigger yields of fruit on your citrus, you are going to get a Q-tip or a little makeup brush, and you are going to look at the little flowers and you're going to find the yellow pollen, and you're going to get some pollen on your Q-tip or your little brush, and then you're going to move it over to the female flower and put a little uh put put some pollen in the female flower and make fruit. You're going to be the bee. Be the bee. Now, science is not my best subject. So I am not going to even attempt to give you a long instructional video on pollination. Google citrus, male flowers and female flowers, and hand pollination, and it will show you what to do. But yes, if you want a lot of fruit, that's what you're going to have to do. Now, when it comes to citrus varieties, if I was only going to have one citrus, it would be a Meyer lemon. They are the most tolerant, cold tolerant. Um, they can take some neglect. They just do really, really well, and you are rewarded with the most big, beautiful lemons. And unlike a store-bought lemon that's got a very hard peel, they're soft. I mean, you can literally like squeeze them and they just fall apart in your hands. They taste wonderful. So if I was only going to have one, it would be a Meyer lemon. And limes are great too. I do like lime. The lime trees are a favorite of mine. My least favorite would be the oranges. I have the least success whatsoever with oranges. Um, they just don't. I mean, they make a pretty plant, but they don't seem to produce much for me. So yeah. So if you're gonna do one, do a Meyer lemon. If you're gonna, or if you just want one to start, do a Meyer lemon. They're the easiest to grow. So you can see here, this is a flower on my lime that's just starting, and that's another thing. So they will be flowering, and they will also have fruit. And so you can leave the fruit on as long as you can. You don't have to harvest them immediately. They just kind of naturally store on the tree. Eventually, when you get more fruit starting, they will get to the point where they will just kind of drop off and roll, and that just it's time. So, and as you can see, you constantly have leaf drop, and I think I need to water all of these. Now this is my pink variegated lemon. It's got blooms on it, you can see. And I think it just is such a pretty plant. I love the leaves. I do need to water it though. When your leaves start looking a bit droopy, that means it's time to water. But yeah, this is a pretty plant. You can see it was out on the deck, got chewed on a little bit by probably a grasshopper last year. But yeah, it's a favorite, and so I really like that. And then what other do we have? So I hope you enjoyed this little tour of my citrus and chat, and maybe you will grow some, maybe you won't. You can see there I've got most of these over here. I think are Meyer lemons. We ended up with several. They had a sale, and there's some other varieties in there, but yeah, Meyers are my favorite. So yeah, we've made just this little island of citrus here and a walkway here, and also please note, this is what happens when they've been flowering. You get a lot of that, so you want to put them someplace you don't mind sweeping or vacuuming. This spot in the kitchen I like because it is a nice brick floor, so I don't have to worry about splashing on a wood floor or something. So yeah, this is my little tour of my citrus. I am noticing some of them are quite dusty, and one of those, oh, that one over there in the corner, I'm seeing some spider mites on that one. So since we are not supposed to freeze for the next 10 days and it's supposed to be quite warm, I will probably start taking some of these little guys out and just giving them a little shower and freshening them up. And they're not that big that I can't move them back and forth by myself if I need to, if we're going to have a freeze or something. But I hope you've enjoyed this little chat about all things citrus, and we'll be back with our final Friday Friday thought, and we'll see where we go from there. And my final Friday thought is sometimes you have a pretty day and you see something that needs done and it wasn't particularly on your list, but hey, let's just go ahead and get it done. So today we did a bit of tidying up on the citrus. We trimmed off a couple of wonky leaves. We did not trim this one because look at that. Look at that guy. That's just so pretty. I've got the light on in here now so you can really see it. But that's such a pretty leaf. It is growing a bit crazy, but we're going to leave that one and see what it does. So yeah, sometimes you just take advantage of a little bit of time and get something done. I moved out all the small citrus and have given them a shower, and it's going to be 52 tonight. So they'll be fine. I'm just going to leave them out there for a day or so just to get some fresh air. We will make sure that they're not setting in full on sun because we don't want them to get sun scalded. And then that will give me the opportunity to mop this floor. Yeah, I think I need to mop. We need to sweep, we need to mop. We can do a little spring cleaning in here. So stick around for bloopers and extras. And I guess all that's left is Happy Flower Friday, and I will see you next week. Citrus are growing. We're going to talk about the birds and the bees, but mostly the bees. Just the bees. Is you get yourself a Q-tip or a little makeup brush, and you look around and you find the male flower with the pollen and the yellow pollen, and you get a little bit of that on your brush, and then you look over and find the female flower and you give her a little pollen to make a citrus. You're gonna be the bee. Be the bee. So yeah, fun times. If you're thinking dirty words right now, we're not saying those. Mm-mm.